are you doing putting on my mom's clothes? Are you happy destroying my family? What has my mother ever done to you?
Do you think your mother really loves you? If she did, why would she leave you here with me?
Don't talk shit about my mother. You caused this. You
You came into my house. You put on my clothes.
into my daughter's room and told her I abandoned her. You don't get to touch anything that belongs to her.
The Kang mansion was quiet in the way houses go quiet when something has been broken and no one has cleaned it up yet. Soojin walked through the front door like she had every right to be there. She moved through the halls, past the staff who looked away, and climbed the stairs straight to the master bedroom. Inside, the bed was unmade. The air still smelled like Flora. On the pillow lay the light blue denim nightgown with the small red cherries. Soojin picked it up and slipped it on. She stood in front of the vanity, adjusting the neckline, watching herself in the mirror with a smile that didn't belong in that room. The door flew open. Clara stood there, still in her school uniform, backpack half off her shoulder, face pale with a fury that didn't need to shout to be heard. "What are you doing putting on my mom's clothes?" Her voice cracked, but it didn't break. "Are you happy destroying my family? What has my mother ever done to you?" Soojin didn't stand. She leaned back against the bedpost, calm, like she'd expected this. "Do you think your mother really loves you?" she said quietly. "If she did, why would she leave you here with me?" Clara's hands clenched. "Don't talk shit about my mother," she said. "You caused this. You." Her phone was already in her hand. She hit the one contact she hadn't stopped checking. When Flora answered, Clara didn't cry. She just said it fast, like if she slowed down, she'd fall apart. "Mum, she's here. She's in your bedroom wearing your nightgown. She's saying, you don't love me." Flora's voice came back, low and steady. "Lock your door, Clara. Don't open it for anyone. Don't come out until I say so. I'm coming." The line went dead. Flora ended the call and immediately dialed again. "Park and Lee," she said. "Kang Mansion, 20 minutes. Criminal trespass, emotional distress of a minor, unlawful use of personal property. Bill me double for speed." She grabbed her bag and left her Mapo-gu apartment without looking back. If you are new here, subscribe and hit the bell because this story is just getting started. You do not want to miss what happens next. 17 minutes later, she was at the mansion. She knocked once on Clara's door. "Clara, it's me. Stay inside." Then she walked downstairs. Soojin was in the kitchen now, pouring tea into Flora's cup, wearing the cherry-embroidered nightgown like it was hers. She turned when she heard footsteps and smiled. "You're back," she said. "That was fast." Flora stopped a foot away. "You came into my house," she said. "You put on my clothes. You went into my daughter's room and told her I abandoned her." Soojin opened her mouth. "The truth is," Flora cut her off, "you don't get to touch anything that belongs to her." The slap landed hard across Soojin's face. Tea spilled across the counter, staining the white marble. Flora didn't lift her hand again. "The stunt you pulled in the office wasn't enough," she said. "You want to see what happens when I stop being polite?" She stepped closer. "My daughter has every right to stay in her father's house. This is her home. You're the stranger here. And you're done." From the hallway, footsteps stopped. Kwang Tae-jun stood there, watching, face pale, hearing every word. Upstairs, behind the locked door, Clara heard her mother's voice and didn't shake for the first time in days. Kwang Tae-jun stood in the doorway like a man who had walked into the wrong life. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, and for the first time in 20 years, his face didn't carry the mask of Chairman Kang. It carried nothing but shock. He saw Flora first, standing over the kitchen counter, chest still rising from the slap, eyes locked on the woman who had no business wearing her clothes. Then he saw Soojin, hand pressed to her cheek, tea staining the marble, cherry-embroidered denim, clinging to her like a mistake she couldn't undo. No one spoke. The silence stretched until it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Flora didn't look at him. "You have 5 seconds to remove her from my daughter's home," she said, her voice flat enough to cut glass. "After that, my lawyers will." Soojin straightened, voice quick, defensive. "Taejun, she came down here. She attacked me. Don't say my name like that." Taejun's voice came out rougher than he meant it to. He stepped inside, and the weight of the last 3 days sat heavy on his shoulders. He looked at Flora, really looked at her, the woman who had walked out with nothing but a box and a denim set and left her ring on the bathroom counter like a verdict. The woman who was now standing in his kitchen, protecting their daughter without even asking him to help. "What are you doing here?" he asked. It wasn't accusation. It was worse. It was lost. Flora finally turned to face him. "I'm doing what you didn't," she said. "I'm making sure our daughter feels safe in her own home." Taejun's eyes flicked to Soo-jin, then back to Flora. "I told her to stay away," he said quietly. "I told her it was over." "Soo-jin doesn't listen," Flora replied, "and you don't stop her." Soo-jin's face flushed. "Taejun, you promised me. I promised you nothing you could twist into this." He cut her off. His voice was low, but it carried through the kitchen like a gavel. "Get out." Soo-jin blinked, as if she hadn't heard him right. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house," he said again, each word deliberate. "Now." For a moment she stood there, disbelief warring with pride. Then she pulled the nightgown tighter around herself, grabbed her bag from the counter, and walked out without another word. The front door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. A different silence settled over the house now. Not the held breath of before. The silence of something that had been removed from a room and left the air cleaner for its absence. Taejun turned to Flora. His hands opened and closed at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. "Clara's upstairs," Flora said before he could speak. "She's safe. Don't make her come down to this." "I'm not going to," he said quickly. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it further. "Flora, don't." She stopped him. Her eyes were clear, tired, but clear. "If you have something to say to me, say it to my lawyer. If you have something to say to Clara, say it to her face when she's ready." Taejun swallowed hard. "Is it over?" he asked. "Not the marriage, not the company. Her." Flora looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the tea towel, wiped the spilled tea from the counter, and said, "It's over the moment you decide it is. And right now, I don't see you deciding." She walked past him toward the stairs. Halfway up, she paused. "Don't come up," she said, without turning. "She's not ready to see you yet." Taejun stood in the kitchen alone. The ring in his pocket felt heavier than it ever had. Upstairs, behind the locked door, Clara heard the front door close and her mother's footsteps on the stairs. She didn't unlock the door. Not yet, but she stopped crying. Flora didn't hurry up the stairs. She moved the way she always did before walking into an OR, measured, deliberate, as if rushing would break something fragile. The hallway upstairs was silent. The air felt thinner up here, heavier with the weight of everything that had happened in this house in the last 72 hours. She stopped outside Clara's door, knocked once. "Clara," she said, low enough that only her daughter would hear. "It's me. You can open the door now." For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the lock clicked. The door opened a crack, and Clara's face appeared, red-eyed, hair half out of its tie, still wearing the school uniform she'd never taken off. She looked at Flora like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to believe what she was seeing. Flora didn't wait for permission. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and pulled Clara into her arms. Clara didn't resist. She folded into her mother's chest like she'd been holding herself together with tape, and the tape had finally snapped. "I told you not to come out," Flora murmured against her hair. "You came," Clara whispered back, voice muffled against the silk of the blouse. Flora pulled back just enough to look at her. Her thumb brushed away a tear Clara hadn't wiped yet. "She won't come back," Flora said. "And if she tries, she'll have to go through me first." Clara nodded, but her eyes were still searching. "Mum, did you mean it? What you said downstairs?" Flora's jaw tightened. "Every word." She sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Clara down beside her. "This is your home, Clara. Not hers, not his, yours. And I won't let anyone make you feel like a guest in it again." Clara swallowed hard. "Why did you leave?" The question came out small, but it carried the weight of 3 days without sleep. Flora exhaled. "Because staying would have taught you that it's okay to let people shrink you to fit their life." she said. And I won't let you learn that from me. Clara looked down at her hands. Dad said he told her to stay away. He told her. He didn't enforce it. Flora's voice wasn't angry. It was factual, the way she stated a diagnosis. There's a difference, baby, and you deserve someone who knows it. Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned her head against Flora's shoulder. Will you stay tonight? Flora smiled, small and real. I'm not going anywhere. Downstairs, the house felt emptier without Sujin's presence, but not lighter. Taejun stood in the kitchen, staring at the stained marble where the tea had spilled. His phone was in his hand. He found the number he'd saved under Park and Lee 3 years ago and never thought he'd use. His thumb hovered over the call button for a long time before he pressed it. Park here, the voice answered, sharp and professional. Taejun cleared his throat. This is Kang Taejun. I need you to stop whatever action your firm is preparing against my company and against Sujin. There was a pause on the other end. Mr. Kang, I'm representing Dr. Flora Kang. I can't discuss her legal strategy without her authorization. I'm her husband, Taejun said. For now, Park replied, and that's not authorization. Taejun closed his eyes. What do I have to do to stop this? You talk to your wife, Park said plainly. She's the only one who can tell me to stand down. The line went dead before Taejun could answer. He stood there in the silence of his own kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear, realizing he didn't know which number to call anymore. The one for his wife? Or the one for the woman who had just walked back into his life as Dr. Flora Kang? Upstairs, Flora smoothed Clara's hair back from her face and whispered, Sleep, baby. I'll be here when you wake up. Clara didn't argue. For the first time in days, she let her eyes close. The night was quiet in a way it hadn't been since Friday. Clara slept with her head on Flora's shoulder, breathing slow and even for the first time in days. Flora sat against the headboard, one arm around her daughter, the other resting on her lap where her phone lay face down. It vibrated at 1:47 in the morning. The sound was low, but in the stillness, it felt like a gunshot. Flora didn't move at first. She watched Clara's face, made sure the girl didn't stir, and then slid her arm out from under her daughter and reached for the phone. The screen lit up. Lumen Medical Group, OR3. Her department, her hospital, her life now. She answered on the second ring without leaving the room. The voice on the other end was Park Ji-yeon, young but steady. The kind of steady that only came from someone who'd already seen blood on the floor and decided it wouldn't break her. Dr. Kang, Ji-yeon said, we have a 42-year-old male, massive aortic dissection. He coded twice in the ER. Min-jae is already scrubbing, but he wants you on this one. He said, if you're in Seoul, you're the only one for this case. Flora closed her eyes for half a second. Aortic dissection. 42 years old. 2 arrests already. Odds were bad. Odds were why they were calling her. Outside the window, Seoul slept. Inside the room, Clara slept. Flora looked at her daughter's face. Peaceful now, the lines of stress smoothed out for the first time since Friday. I'm on my way, she said. She hung up, set the phone down, and stood. Clara stirred at the movement, eyelids fluttering. Mum? Flora sat back on the edge of the bed, brushing hair away from Clara's forehead. There's a patient, she said quietly. They need me at the hospital. Clara blinked up at her, sleep heavy in her eyes, but understanding coming faster than it should for a 14-year-old. Now? Now. Clara sat up, clutching the edge of Flora's blouse like she was afraid if she let go, her mother would disappear again. Do you have to go? Flora's hand covered her daughter's. I have to, she said. But I'm not leaving you. Ji-yeon will send a car. I'll be back before you wake up for school. Clara's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Promise? Flora leaned down and pressed her forehead to her daughter's. Promise. She stood, grabbed her bag from the chair, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused, looking back at the girl who had spent 3 days thinking she'd lost both parents at once. I love you, Clara, she said. I love you too, Mum, Clara whispered back. The door closed softly behind Flora. Downstairs, Taejun was still awake in the study, sitting in the dark with a glass of untouched whiskey and the ring in his pocket burning a hole through the fabric. He heard the front door open and close at 2:30 in the morning. He didn't go to the window to watch her leave. He didn't need to. He already knew where she was going. And for the first time since she walked out, he felt something other than anger or regret. He felt pride. Angry, bitter, useless pride that the woman he'd married was the only surgeon in Seoul they were calling at 2 in the morning for a man who was already dead twice. In the car, on the way to Lumen, Flora changed out of the blouse and jeans and into scrubs in the back seat, her movements automatic, muscle memory taking over. The gold heart pendant rested against her collarbone. She was Dr. Flora Kang again. And somewhere in the city, a man's heart was failing, and he didn't know that the woman walking into the OR was doing it with her daughter's promise still warm on her lips. The Lumen Medical Group lobby was empty at 2:50 in the morning, but the surgical wing never slept. Fluorescent light hit the polished floor in clean, unforgiving lines. The smell of antiseptic and ozone from the sterilizers hung in the air. It was the smell Flora had missed for 14 years and never realized how much it felt like coming home. She moved through the corridor without breaking stride. Scrubs already on, hair pulled back, gold heart pendant tucked beneath the v-neck. Her bag was still in the car. She didn't need it. Park Ji-yeon met her at the scrub sink, tablet in hand, eyes bright with the kind of adrenaline that came before a case you knew you might lose. Vitals are unstable. BP 70/40. He's on the table now. Min-jae started the prep. Flora nodded once. Scan. Ji-yeon handed her the tablet. The CT showed it clear as a warning. The aorta had torn from the root, blood tracking down the vessel like a crack in glass. The false lumen was expanding. If they didn't get to the arch in the next 20 minutes, there wouldn't be a patient to save. Flora handed the tablet back without a word. Inside OR3, the room was a controlled storm. Monitors beeped erratic rhythms. Nurses moved with clipped efficiency. The anesthesiologist called out numbers Flora barely heard. Lee Min-jae stood at the head of the table, gowned and gloved, eyes fixed on the patient. He didn't turn when she entered. He didn't need to. Took you long enough, he said quietly. Flora stepped up to the table, scrubbed and gloved, and looked down at the man on it. 42 years old, husband, father of 2. A stranger, but not to her hands. Patient's yours, Min-jae said. He stepped back without hesitation. Flora's hands moved before her mind caught up. It was like riding a bicycle after 14 years of stillness. The balance came back instantly. Clamp the distal arch. Prep for hypothermic circulatory arrest. I want the cannulation here and here. Her voice was low, precise, caring without needing to be loud. Ji-yeon was already placing the instruments in her palm. Min-jae watched from across the table, arms crossed, but his eyes never left her hands. The first incision went in clean. The room fell into the rhythm Flora remembered. No small talk, no wasted motion, just the sound of instruments, the steady call-outs of vitals, and the quiet, absolute focus of people who knew that 1 second of hesitation meant a life gone. Bleeder on the left subclavian, Ji-yeon said. Got it, Flora replied, her forceps catching it before the field flooded. Pressure's dropping again, the anesthesiologist warned. Then we go faster, Flora said. She worked through the tear like she was reading a language she'd spoken her whole life. The false lumen, the intimal flap, the fragile tissue that had been opened twice before. Each decision came fast, not because she was reckless, but because she'd already run the scenario in her head on the drive over. At 3:47 in the morning, the heart went flat on the monitor. Arrest, someone said. Flora didn't look up. Continue perfusion. I'm not stopping. Her hands didn't shake. She sutured through the arch with the robotic arm assisting, but her eyes were on the tissue, on the exact point where the needle needed to bite. At 4:02 in the morning, the heart restarted. Sinus rhythm. Strong. The room exhaled. No one cheered. In rooms like this, Cheering was for people who didn't understand how close they'd come to losing. Flora finished the final suture at 4:19 in the morning. She stepped back, pulled off her gloves, and looked at the monitor. Stable. Close him up, she said to Ji-yeon. You did the hard part, Ji-yeon replied. Flora nodded, then looked across the table at Min-jae. He was watching her the way he had in residency, like he was seeing something he'd been afraid he'd never see again. You were right, he said quietly. About what? That they'd call you. Flora didn't answer. She pulled down her mask, walked to the scrub sink, and let the water run over her hands. They didn't shake. They never shook. When she looked up, her reflection stared back at her. No cherry-embroidered denim, no mansion, no title of Mrs. Kang, just a surgeon, just herself. Page me when he's stable in ICU, she said to Ji-yeon. Yes, doctor. She walked out of the OR. It was 4:37 in the morning. She had left the mansion at 2:30. The city had moved through an entire shift of itself while she was inside that room. She sat on the bench in the surgical lounge, elbows on her knees, and let herself breathe for the first time in 6 hours. She was back, and the work had remembered her. Downstairs, in the ICU, a 42-year-old man's heart beat on its own again. He didn't know her name, but he owed her his life. Flora peeled off her scrubs in the surgical lounge and checked her phone. 3 missed calls. 2 from Taejun. 1 from Clara at 4:22 in the morning. She would call them back, but not yet. She closed her eyes for 60 seconds, let the adrenaline drain out, then stood up. The driver Ji-yeon sent was waiting at the curb. By 5:40 in the morning, Flora was back at the Kang mansion. She didn't go to the master bedroom. She went straight to Clara's room. Clara was asleep, curled on her side, the covers pulled up to her chin. Flora sat on the edge of the bed and brushed hair off her daughter's forehead. Clara stirred. Mum? I'm back, Flora said quietly. Before noon, like I promised. Clara mumbled something unintelligible and rolled over, grabbing Flora's sleeve. Flora lay down beside her, careful not to wake her fully. She was asleep again within 2 minutes. Flora woke up to sunlight. It was 7:42 in the morning. Clara was still asleep beside her, breathing steady. Flora slipped out of bed, wrote quickly on a sticky note, and placed it on the nightstand. Gone to shower and change. Back in 20 minutes. Love you. Mum. She needed to clean up and change before Taejun started pacing downstairs. She could hear him moving around in the hallway. When Clara woke up at 8:15 in the morning, she sat up and saw the note first. She read it twice, then remembered the conversation from 2 in the morning. Her shoulders dropped. She didn't panic. She just held the note in her hand and waited. 20 minutes later, Flora walked back in, hair still damp, wearing jeans and a plain sweater. Clara looked up. You're here. Like I promised, Flora said, and held out her arms. Clara slid off the bed and into them. Downstairs, Taejun heard the quiet sound of their voices and stopped outside the door. He didn't knock. He just stood there, listening to the sound of his daughter not sounding afraid for the first time in days. Flora heard him before she saw him. The pause in Taejun's breathing outside Clara's door. The way he'd been standing there for the last 10 minutes, like he wasn't sure he had the right to knock. She stepped out into the hallway and shut the door softly behind her. Taejun turned. He looked worse in daylight. Dark under his eyes, jaw tight. He was wearing a plain charcoal 2-piece loungewear set, soft and slightly wrinkled like he'd slept in it. No tie, no cufflinks, no watch. For the first time in years, he looked like a man, not a title. Morning, he said. It came out rough. Flora didn't return it. Can we talk? He nodded once. They went to the study, the room that had been his for 20 years and hers for 3. It still smelled faintly of her old perfume, even though she'd taken everything else out 14 years ago when she put her medical career in a box and chose to stay. Flora sat on the edge of the desk. She didn't sit in the chair. She wasn't a guest here anymore. Taejun stood across from her, hands in his pockets. Soojin won't be back, he said first, like he thought that would fix it. It won't, Flora said. But it's a start. He flinched. Flora let the silence sit for a moment. Then she said it plain. I'm filing for divorce, Taejun. Park and Lee will send the papers by end of day. But I'm telling you the terms now, so you don't pretend you didn't know. Taejun swallowed. Go ahead. 1. Clara lives with me, full physical custody. You get visitation, but only if Clara wants it, and only outside the mansion until I say otherwise. She doesn't sleep here alone with you anymore. Flora, let me finish. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. 2. The mansion stays Clara's primary residence. You can stay here if you want, but Soojin doesn't set foot on the property again. If she does, I press charges for harassment and trespassing. My lawyers have it all on record. Taejun looked like he'd been slapped. I told her it was over. Then make sure she understands you meant it, Flora said, because I won't give her a third chance. And 3. Flora paused, and her eyes locked on his. You don't speak to Clara about me, about us, about anything that isn't her school, her health, or her safety. If you want to talk to your daughter, you do it like a father, not like a man trying to use her as leverage. Taejun stared at her. And if I don't agree? Then Park and Lee will argue it in court, Flora said simply. And I will win. You know I will. The room went quiet. Outside, Clara's voice drifted down the hall, laughing at something on her phone. Taejun closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he looked older. What do you want from me, Flora? He asked. It wasn't defiance. It was tired. I want you to choose, she said. Not between me and Soojin. That ship sank 14 years ago when you told me Kang wives don't work, and I believed you enough to put down my scalpel. I want you to choose Clara. Actually choose her. Not just say it when it's convenient. Taejun didn't answer right away. Finally, he nodded. Fine, I'll sign. Flora stood up. Good. Park will call you. She walked to the door, then stopped. And Taejun? He looked up. Thank you, she said. For not stopping me from going to that surgery last night. Yeah, his throat worked, but he didn't speak. Flora left the room. Upstairs, Clara's laughter came again, brighter this time. Taejun sat down in the chair he'd owned for 20 years and realized he didn't know what to do with it anymore. The study was too quiet after Flora left. Taejun sank into the chair behind his desk, the one he'd sat in for 20 years, making decisions that moved billions. Right now, it felt too big, empty. His phone buzzed in his hand, a board notification he didn't care about. He silenced it. Instead, he opened WhatsApp. Flora. He scrolled. Board meeting at 9. Don't forget Jeju Villa is booked for Friday. Clara has parent-teacher at 3. I'll pick her up if you're late. Eat lunch. You didn't touch breakfast. Good luck today. I believe in you. Hundreds of messages. Not romantic, not dramatic. Just her holding his life together while he pretended he was holding it alone. Reminders, schedules, check-ins. The quiet you're okay she sent at 11 in the morning on days when the board was ripping him apart. He stopped at one from 4 years ago. They offered me chief of cardio at St. Mary's again. I said no. Someone has to keep you from working 20-hour days and forgetting to eat. He hadn't even remembered she'd been offered it. Taejun leaned back and closed his eyes. She dropped her career for him 14 years ago. Not because she wasn't good enough. Because he told her Kang wives don't work. And she chose him, chose Clara. Chose to run the house, manage his life, and smile at galas while her hands, the hands that could save lives, went unused for 14 years. And the smartest, most loyal woman he'd ever met in 20 years of knowing her, he betrayed her. Over Soojin, over ego. Over thinking he could have both and no one would get hurt. The ring in his pocket felt like it was burning. He opened his email. Park and Lee's draft divorce papers were already sitting there, sent early this morning. One click and it would be real. He didn't click. He couldn't let her go. Not like this. Not with her walking away thinking he didn't see what she'd sacrificed. Let Park come. let the lawyers talk. He wasn't signing today. If she wanted a fight, she'd get a fight. But it would be a fight to win her back, not a fight to lose her. Upstairs, Clara sat on the edge of Flora's bed, watching her mother fold laundry that wasn't really laundry, just something to do with her hands. "Mum," Clara said quietly. Flora looked up. "I don't feel like going to school today," Clara said. "Can I stay here? With you? Just for the whole day?" Flora paused. She saw it in Clara's face. The exhaustion, the need to not be alone with the house and the staff, and the memory of Friday. "You don't have to explain," Flora said. "Yes. Stay." Clara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding and climbed onto the bed, resting her head on Flora's lap. Downstairs, Tae-jun stared at the screen. Upstairs, Clara chose her mother. But this time, the silence had a different weight. This time, everyone in the house knew exactly who was choosing who. That evening, at 7:42, Flora was in the kitchen with Clara, making ramen the way they used to when it was just the two of them. No staff, no mansion formality, just two bowls and the sound of the news playing low. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Lee Min-jae, MD, PhD. "You alive? First day back and you ran a 6-hour dissection. Normal people take a week to recover." Flora smiled without meaning to. She typed back, "Patient stable, I'm fine." 3 dots. Then, "Fine isn't an answer. You haven't been in an OR in 14 years and you walked out like you never left. That's not fine. That's terrifying and impressive. So I'm asking again, how are you?" Clara glanced up. "Mum, everything okay?" Flora set the phone down. "Min-jae," she said. "He's checking on me." Clara nodded. "He seems nice. He actually said your name right. Not Mrs. Kang." Flora laughed, short and real. "He was my chief resident at USC. He's always been blunt." She picked the phone back up and typed, "I'm okay. Tired. Clara's here. That's enough for tonight." His reply came fast. "Good. Keep your phone on. If Kang Tae-jun or that hospital board gives you trouble, you call me. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. I owe you at least that much." Flora stared at the message. 14 years ago, he was the only person who told her she was making a mistake quitting medicine. She didn't reply. She just saved his number under Min-jae. And went back to stirring the ramen. She went back to stirring the ramen. Clara ate every noodle. Flora ate half of hers and didn't notice. By 9:30, Clara was asleep on the sofa with the television low and a throw blanket pulled to her chin, and the particular peaceful expression of a girl who had cried everything out and had nothing left to perform. Flora turned off the television. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the garden in the dark. The roses she had planted in the first year. She had read somewhere that roses needed cutting back to grow, that you removed the parts taking more than they gave, and the whole plant came back stronger for it. She had believed that for 20 years. She had pruned everything in this life except the thing that needed it most. She picked up her bag. She was at the front door when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. And then something, the hour, the persistence, made her answer. "Dr. Kang," a woman's voice, careful, rehearsed. "My name is Yoon Charon. I'm a nurse at Severance Hospital. I'm calling because I thought you should know before it becomes public." Flora's hand tightened on the phone. "Tell me." "Kang Soo-jin was admitted to our maternity unit 3 days ago. 12 weeks. The baby is Kang Tae-jun's. She is planning to make a statement." The hallway was very quiet. "Thank you," Flora said. She ended the call. She stood still for exactly 60 seconds. The way she stood before a difficult procedure. Not because she needed the time, because she was a surgeon, and surgeons know that the most important decisions require stillness before movement. Then she turned around and walked back up the stairs. She sat on the edge of the sofa beside Clara and took her hand without waking her. She looked at her daughter's face. 14 years old, finally peaceful, completely unaware of what was moving toward her. Flora held her hand and did not cry. The crying was for Mapogu, for the kitchen floor, for a room that was entirely hers with no one watching. Clara stirred, her eyes opened. She read Flora's face the way she had been learning to read it all week, faster and more accurately than any 14-year-old should have to. Mum. Not. A question. I need to tell you something, Flora said, before you hear it somewhere else. Clara sat up and pulled her knees to her chest. She looked at her mother and braced the way people brace when they already know the shape of what is coming and have decided to receive it upright. Flora told her the truth. She watched every stage of it cross Clara's face. The blankness, the understanding, and then the thing that had no clean name, simultaneously rage and grief, and the specific devastation of a 14-year-old who has just been shown that the adults in her life are capable of consequences, this permanent from choices, this careless. Clara was silent for a long time. Then, she's having his baby. Yes, she's having his baby, and he's been sitting in this house all week, reading your WhatsApp messages and acting like the sad one. Flora said nothing. Because it was accurate, and some accurate things don't need commentary to land. Clara's face crumpled. Not the lobby crying, that had been loud and helpless, the crying of a child who still believed noise could reverse what had already happened. This was different. This was quieter and more total. The difference between the first wound and the second one. The first breaks you open. The second reaches in and rearranges everything. Flora pulled her into her arms. Clara cried the way people cry when there is nothing left to perform for. Without strategy, without dignity. Completely and honestly. The way grief moves through a body when you finally stop managing it. Flora held her and said nothing. She did not say it was going to be okay. She did not say your father still loves you or that time heals things. She was too precise a person for comfort she couldn't guarantee. She held her daughter and let the crying be as large as it needed to be. At some point, Clara's breathing began to slow. Not because the grief was finished, because the body had simply reached its limit and was insisting on rest. Flora waited until she was sure. Then she lowered Clara gently back against the cushions, pulled the blanket up, and stood. She looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag and walked out. The Seoul night was cold, the garden dark, the roses invisible. She walked to the car without looking back at the house. She had stopped looking back. In the car, her phone lit up. Minjai. Not a message this time. A call. She stared at his name on the screen for 3 seconds. Then she answered. I heard, he said. No preamble, no performance. Just the 2 words, direct and certain, the way Minjai had always delivered the true thing. Flora looked out the window at Seoul moving past. Who told you? Jiyeon heard it from someone on the severance night shift. It'll be in the media by morning. A pause. How is Clara? Broken, Flora said. She'll put herself back together. She's her mother's daughter. Minjae was quiet for a moment. The particular quiet of someone choosing their next words carefully. And you? I'm in a car going back to Mapogu, Flora said. I have surgery at 7 in the morning and a cardiology meeting at 11 that I am not going to let run over. I'm fine. Flora. MJ. That's not what I asked. She looked out at the Han River as the car crossed the bridge. Dark and wide and moving steadily the way it always was. Carrying everything without keeping any of it. I know what you asked, she said. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who had studied in the same hallways and failed the same exam and sat on the same hospital floor at 4 in the morning with bad coffee and had earned the right to say nothing and have it mean something. I'm not going to tell you you're okay, Minjae said finally, because you're not, and you know better than to lie to someone who knows your face. Flora almost smiled. You can't see my face. I don't need to. She let that sit. Outside, Seoul glittered the way it always did. Relentless and beautiful and completely indifferent to the private size of anyone's particular disaster. The patient from last night, she said. The aortic dissection. Stable. Transferred to a general ward this afternoon. His wife has been there every hour. Good. A pause. That's what it looks like, Flora said quietly, when someone stays. Minjae didn't answer immediately. She had not meant for it to come out that way. Or perhaps she had. She was too precise a person to say things entirely by accident. Flora, he said. His voice had shifted. The clinical steadiness gone. Something underneath it, now, that had no professional classification. I need to say something. And I need you to let me say it without stopping me. She looked at the river. Go ahead. I left that door open for 2 years because I didn't know how to ask you to walk through it without it looking like I was asking you to leave your life. I know what you had. I know what you gave up. I know that watching you put your scalpel down 14 years ago was the worst professional loss I have ever witnessed. And I should have said that then, and I didn't. He stopped. I'm saying it now. Not because Taijun failed you. Because you deserve to know that someone was paying attention the whole time. To the surgeon, to the woman, to all of it. The car moved through the city. Flora did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was steady. Minjae, I know, he said. I know the timing is terrible. The timing is terrible, she agreed. I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed you to know. Flora looked at his name on her phone screen. Minjae, or the name she had chosen. A door she had left open without admitting she was leaving it open. I know, she said. I've known for a while. Another silence. Different from the ones before. Get some sleep, he said. You have surgery at 7. I know my schedule, MJ. I know you know. I'm saying it anyway. A beat. Good night, Flora. Good night. She ended the call. The car pulled up outside the Mapogu apartment building. The street was quiet. The leaves on the trees were almost gone. Just branches now, clean and bare against the Seoul sky. She got out. She walked upstairs. She unlocked her apartment, her kitchen, her counter, her 2 cups still in the rack from the morning. She set her bag down. She stood in the middle of the room for a moment. Then she went to the bathroom and turned on the shower and sat on the edge of the tub and let herself cry. Quietly and completely and privately. The way she had promised herself she would. Not for Taijun, not for the marriage, for Clara, for the 14 years, for the paper she wrote at 3 in the morning that a man she'd never met had carried to his cardiologist and said her name. For all the things that had been real and had not been enough, and were somehow still worth the cost of getting here. She cried for exactly as long as she needed to. Then she stood up, got into the shower, and washed her face. She had surgery at 7 in the morning. She had a daughter who needed her standing. She had a man's number saved in her phone under a name that was beginning to mean something she was almost ready to say out loud. And she had a life, her own, chosen, built one room at a time from the inside out, that was still under construction and still entirely worth building. Dr. Flora Kang turned off the shower. She dried her face. She went to bed. Tomorrow was already waiting. If Soojin's pregnancy hit you the way we think it did, comment episode 3 below. Flora is not done. Taijun is not done. And that baby changes everything. Subscribe if you are not here already. Episode 3 is coming, and trust me, you are not ready for what happens next.